So how do we organize our PI planning event so that we can have something truly exceptional? We've got over 100 people turning up at this event, right? And so we've got all kinds of stakeholders. We've got testers, developers, we've got Scrum Masters, product owners, we've got senior executives there, sometimes quite very senior executives over there as well. And so this is the 12th video in the PI Planning for Beginners series, where I cover step by step everything that you need to know to have an amazing PI planning event. And in this video is somewhat different because the format, as you probably recognize, is a little bit different. I'm sitting here in speaking from my quarantine hotel, and if you're wondering what the hell am I doing over here, you probably want to click the link up over here somewhere and find out a little bit more about what I'm doing here if that interests you. Otherwise, let's get started. Hey friends, I'm Ahmed, a skilled agile and productivity coach based in the UK. On this channel we cover productivity, agility and joy. Yes, we can even have joy when we are in our quarantine hotel. So one of the things that I really love and I've come to use more and more is the simple checklist. And we looked in one of our previous videos how surgeons, pilots, and even astronauts are using something as simple as a checklist to actually make sure that they reduce their errors and also that they can be consistent across different domains and across different individuals and across different timelines as well. And so if you're interested in that, click on the video over here and you can walk you through all of the information on that. So in a way, in this video, I'm going to walk you through a mega checklist, if you like. It's a large template that we're going to walk you through step by step, everything that you need to do to organize your PI planning event. So I'm going to provide you with this template as an example in the links below, but I'm also going to walk you through and reference all of my other videos for each of the different steps. Now, as I was walking through that today in my hotel room, I realized that I'm missing a bunch of different videos, which I will let you know which ones I intend to be putting forward over the next couple of weeks and months. Okay, so who's this video for? So this video is for release train engineers, Scrum Masters, project management officers, or anybody that are looking to organize and actually get their hands dirty setting up the event. How do I go about setting up this event in an efficient and effective way, and what are all of the steps that I need to do to make sure that I can do that effectively? And that's the problem we're trying to solve over here. If you look on your screen over here, what you're going to see basically an Excel spreadsheet or checklist. And I find it very useful to first of all walk you through it in this format, but by all means, if you wish, you can put it into a Kanban board afterwards to help you and your team actually execute and get ready for your PI planning event. And I've used both, and they both have the kind of the pros and the cons. So what you see over here is you see a template or a checklist, however you want to think about it, of the activities that we need to do. And against that, we've got owners, because remember one thing, I think I've said it before in a number of different videos, is PI planning is not a solo event. It's not something that just the release train engineer puts together, or is the product manager or any executive or the PMO or anybody. It's a whole cast of people that need to come together to work together to actually make sure that you've got an awesome event. So against each activity, we've got who would be doing it. I typically have a starting date and a due date, who's starting it, who's doing it, and then the status, not started, in progress, done. So I know some of you might be going, this is looking like a waterfall project or whatever, but I find it useful. But of course, you can always put it into a Kanban board as well. Don't get too hung up on that either. So let's go through each of these, and it's not necessarily in order. So stuff that is lower down could be actually stuff that needs to be done first, and that's why we have the dates separately. But it's a list of all of the things that typically I find you need to think about when you're putting your PI planning event together. Now, I would use this as a starting point, and I would adjust it and adapt it according to based upon your specific scenario and what it is you are trying to achieve in your specific organization for your PI planning event. So let's look at the first thing. And the first area is what I call event, is scheduling the event effectively. And what you have over here is that basically you want to make sure you've agreed the tentative dates, make sure that you've got clarity in terms of when you wish to do it. And if you want to have an idea of some of the kind of things and ideas that you want to have a look at when you are scheduling your overall event, of course, there are the obvious things like holidays and major events and other things that you want to take into consideration that you want to avoid. And also, if there are, if it's not a remote, if it's a live event that you're running, you want to make sure that you have enough time for everybody to get there. So, for example, when I was working on a program that was in Europe, and many of the participants were coming from around the globe, they didn't use Monday because people would be using the Sunday to actually travel over, and some people wouldn't get there on time, so they typically started a PI planning event on a Tuesday as an example. Okay, but if you want more information on that kind of stuff, there's a video that I put together which is the PI planning calendar tips, so you can go and have a look at that. The link is going to be in the description below, and also in the template as well. So once you've got some tentative dates, you want to obviously, the next checklist is you formalize and agree that what that date is. One thing I found actually quite surprising is that it takes sometimes quite a lot of effort to put in all of the attendees and make sure you've got that dialed in properly, because with the best will in the world, you're not always going to have all of the people available. So you want to make sure that you've got backups for people that aren't there. You want to make sure that you've got all of the stakeholders, not just the people on the teams there, and all of the people on the Agile release train. You might have a number of other stakeholders that you want to have there as well. So be really clear on exactly who you want to have and go through that list and spend some time doing that. The number of times you might think, oh, you don't need to do that. I mean, my experience is that you do, right? And make it really crystal clear exactly who needs to be there. And also as we look at who's playing a facilitating role, right? And who is going to be supporting the teams to actually get ready in their planning events as well. Okay, so once we've done that, we send out the invites, and then we've pretty much got the scheduling of the event pretty much sorted over there as well. Okay, the next big thing that I find is that, especially when you're doing it the first time, the agenda, you need to make sure you've got the agenda dialed in. And so have a think about what is the outcomes you're trying to achieve from your PI planning, how many different teams you have, what is your experience in terms of, do they need more time planning their events, in which case you want to skew the agenda more towards giving more planning time towards the team. Are they really, really well prepared teams? In which case you can have less time spent on planning and more time on the other events that surround the planning events in your PI planning agenda. So once you've done that, make sure it's not just a single person putting together the agenda. Make sure you've got a number of people that are reviewing that, and you've done that, and then you can add that out and send that out to the in your invitations. Now, sometimes you may find that you have that ready, in which case when you're sending out the initial agenda invites to everybody, you can just add that in. Otherwise, what you might find you want to do is you add that in afterwards. Okay, so we've got the invitations, we've got the agenda sent out. Now let's have a look at the presentations that you have. So in your PI planning event, the beginning part of it is really important, because you've got your vision, you've got your goals, you've got what you want to achieve overall as a business, and you've also got hopefully an idea of what you want to achieve over a longer horizon. So you've got your roadmap over there as well. But then also you want to be really clear in terms of what is the intent for that specific PI. And you might have the release train engineer talking about how they did in the previous PI, what are some statistics from there, what are some of the great things that you achieved, have a bit of a celebration over there. So all of these things, you want to try and make sure that they are organized and dialed in fairly well. And so that's what the PI planning presentation section over here is actually showing. So you've got your grand kickoff, and then you've got your day 1 and day 2. Assuming you've got, I'm assuming a 2 day, right? Now, if you've got a 1 day PI planning event, then obviously you just have 1. And if you've got 3 because you're doing remote, then you have 3. Whatever it is, then you have that arranged over there. And then obviously you want to make sure that you've got the slides or whatever mechanism you're using to actually do that presentation, you have that ready as well, and you've aligned with all of the different stakeholders as well. Sometimes, you know, the executives are going to be really busy. That's, you know, that's the nature of executives, right? So you want to make sure you've given them enough time to do that. So make sure that you put in any requests that you need to early on as well. Then we move on to the next one, which is basically around the socializing and the group refresher. Now, this bit over here, this I find is increasingly important when you've got remote events going on. Okay, so we've got remote PI planning events. You want to break it up a little bit, because otherwise it can get a little bit stale, a little bit dull. So in the beginning, you might want to have some kind of games, some kind of quizzes, something like that in the beginning, to inject a little bit of life into the event. Otherwise, 2 or 3 full days of planning can get pretty intense and pretty tiring as well. So have a think about what kind of things people would enjoy, put something together over there, and this section is around that as well. Now the next section, really critical, is around inputs, okay? And so throughout this series, these previous 11 videos, we've been pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, been looking at around and focusing a lot on the inputs, around the vision and the goals, around the roadmap, around the features that you need to get ready, and also around the architectural runway. Okay, so for each of these, I've got different videos that I have referred to, so you can have a look and see in detail how I would do each of those different areas, and indeed how I do each of those different areas. There's also something that I have, which is a featured team matrix. For me, this is a must-have. I realize now that I haven't got a video on that, so I'm going to put a video together on that. And basically what this is this is basically talks about all of the features that we have, and against that, who is going to need to contribute towards the delivery of those features. This is really important, I find, in terms of so that the teams know which features they need to focus on when they come into the PI planning event, and it just makes things really clear for the teams to know where they should be focusing on from the get-go. So I always have this, even though it's not an official input, if you look at the Scaled Agile framework, but I find it really useful. Try it, let me know what you feel. You might say, that's rubbish, I don't like it, that's fine. Put it in the comments, tell people if you didn't like it, but I personally find it invaluable. Okay, next is moving on to the tooling licensing section. So, you know, this is assuming you're using an online or remote planning. And you know, as you can see, because, you know, when I'm creating this video from a COVID quarantine hotel. So we're in COVID times at the moment. So if you're watching this video during these times, then you know, a lot of the kind of PI planning events, or most of them, are using remote tools in one way, shape, or form. Are we going to go back? Who knows? Who knows? You know, the standard safe thing is face-to-face communication. The Agile thing is face-to-face communication. I don't know if we're going to go back. Let's see now. I dare say we'll never go back to the heavy 98% kind of face-to-face kind of events that we used to see. We'll probably end up with more something in the middle. That's my guess anyway. But let's see. I tend to think this remote working could be here to stay, but who knows? Let's see. Anyway, so this section is around tooling selection. What I find is when you're doing remote selection, be clear in terms of who actually needs access. Some tools, they struggle with a lot of concurrent users as well, and so what you might find is that you might want to limit the number of people that are actually using the tool as well. But it's a sweet spot, right? I've been on some programs that want to limit it aggressively, and I'm against that. At the same time, you don't want to let everybody have access to it, so you probably need to find something in the middle that works for you, which enables enough collaboration, and also at the same time you've got not overwhelming the tool with too many concurrent users as well. So you've got to make sure you've got that worked out, who's going to be doing that, and then setting up the boards as well, especially when you're doing it the first time. You're not going to have anything there. Now, I've used like different tools like Neuriva, Miro, and Mural, and they've all got the kind of the pros and the cons. To be honest with you, I'm not going to go into that in this video. But each of them, you know, they have their templates, which I find you almost always, if you want to have a good event, you're almost always going to have to tweak and update and sharpen those up a little bit. Then once you've done that, whatever tool you're using, whether it's a Jira or some other SDLC tool, you're going to need to get your data from there into the board that you're actually using. Now, of course, if you've got some add-on that actually enables the kind of PI planning that links in directly into your tool, then use that, obviously, because that would be, the best. I personally haven't found anything that I think is really amazing. But if you have seen something and I've just missed it out, just please put it in the comments, let me know. I'd love to check it out, see what you think. Okay, so we need to get the data ready, making sure all of the features are ready, making sure they're in the right format, making sure everything's there. Give a cut-off date to everybody to make sure. If you do a cut-off date too early, you're going to have, guess what? What do you think? You're going to have stale, old features. And if you do it too late, then you're not going to have enough time to populate and be ready for your PI planning. So it's a sweet spot. I typically find a couple of days before PI planning, you probably want to make sure that you have your data ready, and then you need to load that data. Now that might be a trivial task to something more complex, but it's something that needs to be done as well. You check that, and now you've got your tool loaded with all of the data. You do not want to turn up to your PI planning event without all of the data loaded up in your tool. Okay, especially if you've got a remote, and equally if you've got a live event, also you want to make sure you've got all of that ready. And you might get each Scrum Master. One thing I find is that train up your Scrum Masters. If, say, for example, you're an RTE, train up your Scrum Masters to know how to use the tool and get them to put their own user stories into the tool. I think that's nice. It spreads the responsibility, and then people feel accountable as well, making sure they've got their stuff ready and making sure that you spread the burden as well. Okay. All right, the next section is around training, and this is one thing I'm really keen on when it comes to PI planning, is especially when you're doing it for the first and probably even the second time, but even beyond, I find it's always useful because it's like typically every 12 weeks, people forget, right? So the first time you want to make sure that you have trained people up on how to use PI planning, what's expected from them, so they don't turn up and look at each other and go, what should I be doing? I don't know, right? So you've got training over there, and I do a kind of step-by-step guide with a pack. At some point, I'll probably put that in as a download or a video, but that's what I do. I walk everybody step-by-step, kind of dummies guide of how we're going to be doing PI planning. And that's frequently attached in the agenda, and that's also available for everybody in their emails as well, so that they know what to refer to. And I also have something called supporting roles. So what I mean by that is that we don't have, as I said, only one, you don't have just the release train engineer or the PMO or an executive or project manager, whoever, as the sole point of contact. You might have, and you should have, I would argue, multiple different roles that are supporting you for different things, right? So for example, if I have a question around a feature, what do they mean by a certain thing? Who do I go to? If I have a resourcing problem, who do I go to? If I have a challenge with architecture, who should I speak to? So all of these things would be useful for you to have, and I typically put together a document that actually has a list of probably varying around 10 to 12 different roles. So you've got this problem, this is who you go to speak to. This problem, this is who you go to speak to. And I find that really useful. And people find it useful, so that there's a real clarity over there as well. Then the next section is around making sure that you send out invites for the training. We set up the confidence votes. We set up the retrospectives. I'm not recommending these, but these are the ones that I use. I use Slido. I find it so simple. There's no licensing or anything dramas going on over there. So that's why I just use that. And I'll probably put a video at some point in the future as well. And the same with retro, I think, .io. And I use that as well. Again, no licensing dramas. It's fun. I hope I'm not mistaken in saying that. No licensing dramas over there as well. So very useful tool, and these are the ones that I personally found really useful. The thing I like about retros is that you've got voting as well. So you can put in your things that you think are important, and then other people can come and they can vote them. And then when you're doing your retrospective, your PI planning retrospective, you can have everybody put in all of their stuff in during the 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, wherever it is. And then during your retrospective, you can based upon the votes that have come up, you can then focus on the things that are really important. So I find that quite useful as well, especially if, you know what, at the end of like 2 days or 3 days, people are like, they're like, oh, I don't want to be doing the retrospective now, right? The retrospective is we should be doing a retrospective, right? So at that point, you can dial it in and you can have a shorter retrospective, and I find retro quite useful because the voting element of it means you can have a shorter retrospective as well. And then after PI planning, you've got a couple of things you want to make sure is. One of the really important things you want to make sure is that you take all of the information and you are able to make sure you put it into your tool, so your SDLC, so you've got your SDLC tool, so that you can actually don't lose any of that very valuable information you spent thousands on collecting. Okay, and then obviously your retrospective as well, and any risks and impediments you want to make sure that you've captured those and you take those in, as well as with your goals and your other things that you want to achieve as well. So there you have it. So I typically would start to fill this out maybe, if you do it the first time, I do it 3 weeks. You go, wow, that's a long time. Yeah, but when you're still learning, it's going to take you a long time to actually get your head around all of these different things. So start off about 3 weeks in advance. If you've done it before, lots of times before, then you could go to 2 weeks. Depending upon how proactive your team is, you may find that a little bit scary at times. So typically start off with around 3 weeks before your PI planning. Start to have a group of people come around this, use this, put your templates over there, and let me know what you find. Okay, you'll find a link to this in the description below. And if you've got any questions, put them in the comments. And here's Ahmed signing off from his quarantine hotel. Love learning. Keep growing, and don't forget to bring the joy, whether you're in quarantine or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, take care and see you soon. Goodbye.